Our next witness wishes to be known as Nicola, does she?
She does.
Nicola, please.
In your raised hand and repeat after me. I swear by Almighty God
I swear by Almighty God
that the evidence I shall give
that the evidence I shall give
shall be the truth,
shall be the truth,
the whole truth,
the whole truth,
and nothing but the truth.
and nothing but the truth.
Nicola, you are a haemophilia A carrier, and you were told at age 7 you weren't a haemophiliac yourself because it was a male disease, but that your levels of factor VIII were low.
Yes, that's correct.
You were treated at the Royal Free Hospital,
Yes,
and in 1980, when you were about 9, you underwent a tonsillectomy.
yes,
And that was the first occasion on which you were given factor VIII.
yes, yeah,
Until then, you'd always been given cryoprecipitate.
that's correct.
The letter discharging you from your time in hospital for the tonsillectomy says you would be reviewed on a 2-weekly basis to have your liver function tests done.
Mm-hmm.
Were those tests ever done?
No,
At the time your treatment was changed to factor VIII, were you or your parents told anything about it?
no, it's only later in life that I knew that it changed to factor VIII.
So at the time, you weren't even aware that it had changed?
No.
Before the tonsillectomy, you've described in your statement that you were a very active child,
That's correct.
but that all changed after the procedure.
Yes, it did.
What can you tell us about that?
I just changed from, I ended up being a child that took to her bed, would come home from school, would miss school and just spend my time sleeping. I had skin rashes, aches, pains, and that was the change.
You felt unable to do all the outdoor activities that you'd previously done?
Previously done, that's correct. And my schooling, education declined. Yeah, I missed a lot of school because I just wasn't well, generally unwell.
In 1981, you were admitted into hospital for 6 weeks.
That's correct.
What happened when you were there?
That was because I'd put on a lot of weight and the
Do you want me to read a part of your statement? You'd put on a lot of weight and your mother had raised concerns about your deteriorating health. So you were put on a very strict diet and you were made to go swimming and walking with the nurses.
That's correct, yeah.
And you walked up and down the 12 flights of stairs of the hospital every day
Yeah.
to try and lose the weight. At the end of the period, you'd only lost a few pounds, and the doctors accused your parents of smuggling in food when that hadn't happened at all. You've obtained your medical records, and is there anything in them about that 6-week stay in hospital?
Nothing.
There's no record at all?
No.
At the end of that 6-week stay, the doctors still hadn't identified anything wrong with you?
No, that's correct.
And your mum kept taking you to the doctors?
Yeah.
What did they tell her was what they thought was wrong with you?
They thought it was all in my head and that I had psychological issues. and that was it really. Just, yeah, sorry, I've lost track.
Right. Your mum was told it was all psychological.
Yes.
Your school contacted the county council,
Yeah.
and the psychology service were contacted, and that was the approach that was taken. This was all in your head.
Yeah.
In 1984, when you were about 13, you were told you needed to be tested for HIV.
Yes.
What were you told?
I was taken into a room and it was videoed, I think for teaching purposes, and that there was a lot of haemophiliacs had developed HIV, and that I should be tested because of the treatment that I'd had, and I was tested for HIV.
Which thankfully came back negative.
Yes.
But your concern is that you were in that room being told about HIV
Yeah.
on your own.
Yes.
Your parents weren't with you.
No.
Now, when you wrote your first statement for the inquiry, you thought you'd not heard anything at all about hepatitis C
That's
until
correct.
1995.
Yeah.
Since then, you've been provided with video consultations that took place in 1990 and 1992.
Yeah.
Were you aware that those consultations were being videoed?
No. No.
In the 1990 consultation, there's a discussion about HIV, and you were told that because you'd not had blood products since 1981 and had tested negative in 1989, then the chances of your being infected with HIV were as likely as you flying to the moon.
Mm.
Do you recall that being said to you?
No, I don't actually recall the video or the consultation, but obviously I was there. I remember being videoed in 84 for the HIV, but not for what's come to light, no.
There was then a discussion on a video we can see. There was a discussion about what hepatitis C is, and you were told there was little knowledge about it, and that the test could only show if you'd had it in the past, not if you were presently infected. And you were then asked if you wanted to be tested.
Yeah.
And you've seen the video,
Yeah,
and
I have. Yeah,
you
I
can
have
see that
now.
you said yes, you did.
Yes, yeah,
And you were asked then if you wanted to be told the results, and you said you did.
yes.
If we look at the note of that consultation in your medical records, it's 1756006, please, Henry. We can see in the middle of the page, towards the bottom of the current page, discussed hepatitis C. But there's no note that a hepatitis C test would be undertaken on the document. And if we look at the bottom of the page, we can see review 1 year. In your medical records, is there any note of a test being taken?
Not that I've seen, no.
And is there any note at all of a result being given to you at any stage around this time?
No.
If we go to document 1756016, please. This appears to be the next appointment that you have at the clinic. And in the middle of the page, middle of the entry, we can see HIV negative, Hep B negative. But there's nothing here, no reference at all, to hepatitis C.
Do we have a date for that entry?
So there's no date for that entry, but one can see if one looks towards the bottom of the
It must have
page.
been after August.
It must have been after August and before October 1990. It's the best we can do. And so we have the 1990 video consultation where you are asked if you'd like to be tested and asked if you'd like the results, but then nothing in 1990 or 1991 that addresses any of that or any tests seemingly being undertaken. Then in the 1992 video of the consultation, there's another explanation of what hepatitis C was, But you were told then, weren't you, that because your liver function tests were normal, it was unlikely that hepatitis C was an issue for you. And you were told that your physical health issues that you'd been raising, the tiredness, the aches, would be looked into and hepatitis C would be checked. But again, there's nothing in your records that you or your lawyers have been able to identify suggesting that a hepatitis C was ever done at that stage. So as far as you're aware, you weren't actually tested for hepatitis C at that point.
Yeah, I wasn't aware, no.
So we get to 1995. Your mum saw something on the television about hepatitis C. What did she tell you about it?
She'd seen, I think it was on the news or something about haemophiliacs and this new strain of hepatitis, which is hepatitis C. And they listed the signs and symptoms. And my mum rang me and said, you know, have you seen this? Which I hadn't. And she said, every one of those is you. You're having treatment at the moment. Why don't you ask them if you've ever been tested for hepatitis C, or if they'll test you for hepatitis C? I was having treatment for an ankle bleed, and when I was at the hospital, I said to the nurse who was giving me the treatment, have I ever been tested for this hepatitis C? She laughed and said, oh, you won't have that. Went off and got my notes and came back and said, oh, you were positive in 91.
You've since gone back through your notes, and as we've discussed, there's nothing in your notes between 1990 and 1995 or any indication of a positive test then.
No.
So you're not sure why the nurse said that?
No.
And you were then seen by Dr. Goldman either the same day or the following day?
Yes, I was seen by Dr. Goldman, who did a review sheet and said, well, you're hepatitis C positive, but I wouldn't worry about that because we don't know much about it and it might not affect you for another 20 years or so. Think yourself lucky you're not HIV positive.
There is a letter in your medical records that it may have been sent in between the time you saw the nurse and seeing Dr. Goldman. It's not the chronology is not entirely clear in your mind, but it's important we look at it. At 1756011, and it seems that perhaps you saw Dr. Goldman and then saw her again a second time. But in this letter in August 95, she wrote to you and said, the results of your recent blood tests were all normal, except for a mild abnormality in your blood count, which is probably not significant. But I'd like the blood count to be repeated just to be sure. And then you think you had that conversation with her about what hepatitis C was.
Yeah.
But in this original letter to you, there wasn't a specific reference to hepatitis C.
No.
You've said that once you'd had that second meeting with Dr. Goldman, where where she said it wouldn't affect you for some years, or however the chronology was, you didn't then think much of the diagnosis from that point onwards.
No, I think because you're younger, and sort of the mention of 20 years or so, it might not affect you. I think I just put in my head, oh well, 20 years is a long time away, and kind of didn't think any more of it, just to get on. But I think in my mind, it kind of almost answered, I guess, the questions of my health, and kind of just tried to plod on, really.
Did anyone say to you in 1995 that you were actually a natural clearer of hepatitis C?
No, because that was when Dr. Goldman had told me that I was hepatitis C positive.
So in 1995, you're very clear that that's when you were told you were hepatitis C positive.
Yes.
In 2004,
Hmm.
you wrote to the Royal Free for information you needed to make a claim to the Skipton Fund.
That's correct, yeah.
And at that point, you were told that you'd tested positive in 1995, but then you'd been retested in 1998 and had tested negative.
Yes, yeah.
Again, had anyone said to you in 1998 that you'd tested negative?
No, not that I can remember. I think Professor Lee got involved, but no, it was my GP that had suggested to make a claim to the Skipton Fund because that had come about, and it was him that applied to the Skipton Fund, and then I believe that the form goes to then the treating centre, and that's when Professor Lee had said I'd naturally cleared hepatitis C.
But from 95 of the positive results until 2004, as far as you were concerned, you were hepatitis C positive.
Yes.
Although you were a natural clearer, you feel that the hepatitis C has had a very significant impact on your physical health over the years.
Yes.
If we go back to when you were at school, you've said you were very tired with a lot of aches and pains. And in fact, it got to the point where you started skipping school to come home and sleep.
Yes.
And as a result, you feel your educational progress was very restricted.
It was, yeah. That's all I wanted to do was sleep. I ate, I hurt.
You left school at 16 with just 4 GCSEs
Mm.
and went on to become a nursing assistant,
Yes.
but struggled with that as well.
Yes, I did. Yeah, the shift work. I think most people would anyway, shifts, but it was quite physically. Well, you are quite physically active, and I did struggle with that. And again, I used to do my shifts or do what I could with work, come home, sleep. And if I could, I'd wake up to go to work, you know.
You now work in an office-based role, but you continue to be very fatigued and unwell,
Yes, yeah.
and that restricts your ability to work and your ability to socialise.
Yes, I don't really socialise.
And you've said in your statement you also struggle to participate in family life and activities. You've talked about it impacting your role as a mother. You've said I can't participate in lots of family activities. It takes you too long to recover from them physically. And you struggle with the effect that's had.
It takes me all my strength to work. So when I'm finished work, I just try and rest where I can, which has impacted. On my family, yeah.
You've had progressive elevation of your autoimmune antibodies.
Yes.
And initially it was thought you might be suffering from lupus.
Yeah.
But since then, your treating doctors confirmed it's not lupus, but that it is attributable to your hepatitis C.
Yes.
Despite that, you applied to the Skipton Fund, but were turned down.
Yes.
Can you tell us why?
I was turned down the first time. Are we talking about the first time?
Yeah, the very first
Sorry.
time. It's all right.
On the balance of probabilities that I naturally cleared the virus within 6 months of probably contracting the virus. So yeah, I wasn't awarded.
You had confirmation when you made that application, didn't you, that you had a hepatitis C ELISA result that was positive in 1997 and positive antibody by EIA results in 1995, 1997 and 1998. And you've said in your statement that Skipton concluded that the doctors had got it wrong.
Yes.
And that the 1997 test must have been wrong as well.
Yes, they must have used the wrong test for it.
So on that basis, as they said, you must have cleared it within 6 months, and so fell outside the rubric of the Skipton Fund.
Yes, yeah.
Professor Tuddenham wrote to the Skipton Fund on your behalf, and we have his letter, 1756004, please. And it says this, in the middle of the first paragraph, where he sets out your situation as a manifesting carrier. Then he says, however, it was the BPL concentrate given for the tonsillectomy, which is the most likely cause of her seroconversion to hepatitis C antibody, that was noted much later. By the time this was looked into in 1991, and subsequently her hepatitis C RNA was negative with strongly positive antibody. However, on reviewing the case records, it's evident that immediately after the tonsillectomy, she had a period of pyrexia-marked tiredness, weight loss and skin itching, which persisted for years on and off. A letter in our notes from a clinician at the time remarks that she needed to have liver function tests done. However, these were never done, and there is no doubt that was our error. Based on the symptomatology, I'm convinced she had a period of chronicity of hepatitis C infection that would have shown up with abnormal liver function tests had they been performed. But by the time we tested her many years later, she'd spontaneously cleared hepatitis C. Various chronic health problems she's had since can also plausibly be attributed to the undoubted hepatitis C infection she acquired from BPL concentrate and/or the cryoprecipitate. She's been known nearly 8 years now to have progressive elevation of autoimmune antibodies accompanied by symptomatology consistent with a collagen vascular disease for which she's under treatment. She has markedly elevated level of anti-nuclear antibody. Recent studies have been published which show a strong association between hepatitis C infection and autoimmune disease. I would put this in the balance as an additional argument for her to be compensated for hepatitis C infection received or caused by infusion with NHS factor VIII concentrate. And he notes that you've also got persistently elevated markers of chronic inflammation. Despite that, your application was refused. You then suffered from breast cancer in 2010 and approached the Skipton Fund again, and they refused to provide any assistance at that point either.
That's correct, yes.
Why was that in relation to the cancer?
What they did was basically made us jump through hoops, get statements from my parents, and get whatever else we could remember or kind of find. And it was all produced to them with the backup of Professor Tudman's letter there, as you can see quite clearly says, and they said no. On the balance of probabilities, I cleared the virus within 6 months, and that there's not really enough evidence. It's almost like a little bit of a game now with the Skipton Fund, which I know is now EBUS. It's just applied just to really highlight how unfair they are. So not only struggling as being seen as female with haemophilia or a low factor VIII level, I think the decision makers at the Skipton Fund struggle with that, and that there is other people, mainly males, that have been awarded on the same grounds as me. But I personally believe that because I'm female, that they won't, and that's why they haven't awarded me.
When you got to having breast cancer, you applied again, and you've said in your statement that that was declined because it was the wrong sort of cancer.
Yes, it was. With the Penrose inquiry, there's a statement in there that says that 70% of people that received poor products will go on to develop a cancer. So because I had the breast cancer, I applied again, and yeah, you're correct. You're correct. I've forgotten that. Sorry, they did say, but it wasn't that cancer. Yeah, I had the wrong one.
And again, we have two further letters that Professor Tuddenham wrote on your
Yes.
behalf. I just want to have a look at those. 1756008, please. It's a letter to whom it may concern, but it was for your applications. And he notes in the middle of the first paragraph that a contentious point arises over the unfortunate fact that she was never tested for liver function during the early period that she was so infected, and only subsequently much later tested and found to have cleared the infection. He refers to a letter that you'd written summarising your situation and endorsed everything in that letter. And he then closes his letter saying this: I personally think that if she's refused any compensation on a highly restricted interpretation of the rules governing the disbursement of the fund, then that manifestly is unfair. And a subsequent letter from him in October 2010, 1756014, please. And he opens the letter saying this: concerning the evident fact that Mrs. Nicola Jones was infected with hepatitis C through infusion of NHS factor VIII concentrate at the time of her tonsillectomy in 1980. These comments are based on records in case notes held at the Catherine Dormandy Haemophilia Centre. I believe that copies of these case notes are available to the panel, who are trying their best not to award what she is obviously due, namely compensation for having been infected by hepatitis C and having developed a degree of chronicity. And he then goes on to set out your history. Despite those letters from Professor Tuddenham, you did not receive any support from the Skipton Fund.
No.
You've got a son and a daughter, and we have their permission to discuss their medical conditions as well.
Yeah.
Your son is a haemophiliac,
Mm-hmm.
and you discovered in 2013 that your son had been tested for HIV and hepatitis C.
That's correct.
How did you find out about that?
We were going abroad, and you have to have letters for customs, and then if that's because you carry the treatment with you, and then a letter for if they need treatment for the doctor or whoever is treating them, explaining how to give their treatment and what is wrong with them, like low factor 8 level, and this is their treatment. And it was, in that letter, that I found out that my son had been tested for HIV and viruses.
And you, as far as you were concerned, had never consented to those tests, or had even been asked to consent to such testing. Your daughter is a carrier and has a platelet disorder,
Yes.
and you then discovered that your daughter had also been tested without consent
That's correct.
since birth.
Yes.
We've had a response from Dr. Leesner from Great Ormond Street Hospital, sir, which will be put up on the website in due course, in which she says the usual practice would be to obtain verbal consent for the viral screening tests, but she accepts this is not documented in the notes of the two children. She cannot say with certainty that consent was obtained, and if that's the case, then she has apologised for that.
Yep.
But for you, Nicola, because of your own experience and the experience with your children, you now lack trust in the medical profession.
Yeah.
And it's had a very significant impact on your mental health.
Mm-hmm.
Can you tell us something of that?
You don't have to unless you wish to.
I just struggle because of what happened to me. In my childhood, and how I was made how to feel. And I kind of, part of me thinks, is it history repeating itself? That's what I worry about, because the children have never had blood products, so why would they need to be tested? I worry about the impact that it had on me. For the kids.
And it's been incredibly difficult, you say in your statement, for you to have to keep going back for your own treatment and to deal with your children's treatment
Yeah.
in that context.
I avoid going now. My husband goes, and he'll take the children, but I try and avoid going anywhere where there's a mention of haemophilia or centre. Yeah.
Finally, you've also tested positive for hepatitis G.
Mm-hmm.
Can we have 1756002, please, Henry? It seems to show a positive test in 1980 and a positive test in 1992, or at least a test done on samples from those dates. You saw the result in 1995 and decided to take a photograph of it in 2009.
Yes.
Had anyone said anything to you about this?
No. No one has ever said anything about it, and still hasn't. I did ring up the Haemophilia Society and ask them if they knew anything about hepatitis G, which, no.
And when you came to have your records for the purposes of this inquiry, was this document within them?
No.
And then in 2004, you were also told you were at high risk of having contracted VCJD.
That's correct, yes.
And subsequently that you'd received an implicated batch.
That's correct, yeah.
And you've said in your statement that was really just one more thing.
Yeah, it was just one more thing. It was just a letter in the post. I was 5 months pregnant with my son. Yeah, kind of read the letter, showed it to my husband, and kind of said to him just another thing to add.
The hepatitis G and the VCJD was something else to add to the list of
To the list,
things.
yeah. put it away. Yeah.
Those are the questions I have for you. I'm just going to turn to Mr. Snowdon, see if there's anything else he wants me to raise. Finally, is there anything else you would like to say?
Yeah, I did. This is it. I was going to write a big, long thing, but I thought we might not have time, so I kind of narrowed it down a bit. And I think, for me, it's about what has happened, but protecting our future. So the Children's Act 1989 allocates duty to local authorities, courts, parents and other agencies in the United Kingdom to ensure children are safeguarded and their welfare is promoted. When our children were born in 2002 and 2004, it is my belief there were elements of clear neglect from the doctors stroke NHS to safeguard the children from unnecessary tests, stress and indirect abuse. Yet when the Children's Act 2004 was updated, it clearly states that the interests of the children and young people are paramount in all considerations of welfare and safeguarding, and that safeguarding children is everyone's responsibility. Considering have not received blood products, then why were the children tested? That's what I'd like to know. I think from our point of view, haemophilia is, I know, a burden for everyone. We were accused of child abuse when Kira was 6 weeks old because when she cried, she had little bruises come out on her head. And then with Jake, when he was born, he was whisked off for a scan on his head because he was born with forceps. And the apology was to the doctors, not to us. I just want to thank Sir Brian, the legal team, and everyone here. Mark for being here, and probably the only one who's had to listen to me harp on about my bits of paper. And also, I want to thank my children and my husband.
There's just one question which I've got for you. Will you have to pay this coming here to give this evidence?
Yes.
In terms of what happens to you tomorrow? How long will it take you to recover? Do you think?
To recover.
Well, to get over, you pay in terms of tiredness for giving evidence.
I'll probably go home and go to bed. I'm off tomorrow. I booked tomorrow off because I thought I'll be too. And then I'm back at work. I booked tomorrow off because I know I'll probably just sleep today.
Well, that's what I thought might be the position.
Yeah.
And I think it just emphasises what a great effort it's been for you to be here and how much you deserve our thanks for bringing yourself to do it, particularly when you knew there'd be a cost. Thank you.
Thank you.
We'll take a break until 3 o'clock. At 3 o'clock, I think we'll probably go straight up from one witness to another.
Yes.
They must take however long they need. We will not rush any witness, and we'll finish when we finish. But just so that you know, there won't be another break, except for a couple of minutes between the next two witnesses.
3 o'clock.